This non-promotional podcast series is organised and funded by UCB, intended for healthcare professionals in the UK and Ireland.
Welcome to the Let's Talk About Dravet Syndrome podcast series. I'm your host, Mike Taylor. I'm a consultant paediatric neurologist in Leeds Children's Hospital. In this series, we'll share practical input from specialists and real-life stories from patients and their families. This is to bring you closer to this topic, raise awareness, and empower the medical community to work closely with patients and their families to improve outcomes and quality of life. If you've not done so, please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss another episode. And if you love this podcast series, please do me a favor, give us a rating or review on whatever platform you're listening to us on. The reason we need this is the more positive reviews or ratings we get on those platforms, the more this podcast will be shown to those who have never listened to us before. The aim is to improve the lives of people who have Dravet syndrome.
And today I'm joined by Galia Wilson. Galia is a parent, first and foremost, of a young person with Dravet syndrome. And she is also chair of Dravet UK. So whenever I say I've had lots of experts on over the range of this podcast, we get to go home at night, we get to switch off. But I have the true 24/7 expert. So Galia, thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Nice to be here.
Whenever it comes to Dravet, what do you feel are the biggest issues that a family face, both at the start of their journey and as they progress?
So, there are multiple issues that families face. I think the first is obviously the seizures, because the seizures come first without warning, and you don't know that your child isn't so-called normal. And the seizures are very hard to manage. And we often talk in the community about PTSD that is suffered by parents who have had to manage those very, very difficult, prolonged seizures where you don't know the outcome when they start. They can start at any time, and the outcome could be catastrophic. It could be death, or it could be injury. It could be long-term damage, and just trying to get on top and stop those seizures before you've got any other medical intervention or support is truly terrifying, especially if you don't know what a seizure is. And the first seizure is obviously extremely terrifying. And from my own experience, it's my child's going to die. They look like they're going to die. I've never seen a seizure before, followed by often very prolonged seizures. And by prolonged, I mean, half an hour regularly or up to 2 hours and possibly longer. And so I think the early days is trauma for the parents and the siblings and the family. I think as things settle down, and by settle down, I mean, we all become used to it. Then the secondary issues with the comorbidities. And that can be behavioural issues, which is a big problem as children get older and through adulthood. And then there's the lack of support, respite, help. People, your family and friends, as much as they want to help, often they will melt away because it's not a one-off trauma. This is an ongoing trauma that happens every day. And, as much as some friends are supportive, they can only tolerate so much trauma and difficulty in your life. You can't plan, you can't, go out for dinner, and you can't do what you used to do. So there's all that kind of social isolation that happens. And then as they become older, there's issues with where do they go to school? How can I get them the right place? Should they go to mainstream? If they're in mainstream, do they really fit in mainstream? Then if you realise that they don't fit in mainstream, it's finding that special needs school. And the environment now is incredibly hard to get your child into a suitable school, if you can find one, that they can manage the seizures and also behaviours quite often. And then there are mobility issues that come. There are often autism diagnoses to manage. There are issues with sleep. Often they don't sleep quite often at night, or if they do, the seizures quite often turn into nocturnal seizures or when they sleep. So there's an issue around that. And then there's often issues with feeding, and on and on and on. So the comorbidities, the associated conditions really become the harder thing as the child progresses into early teens and then into adulthood. It continues, it doesn't stop. And that's the thing about Dravet. It is not a childhood epilepsy. It begins early, but it's a lifelong condition if you're lucky enough to have them. And then, of course, there's a risk of SUDEP, which, you know, in the Dravet community, we've all kind of know people that have died. Well, I know multiple. Obviously, it's a real risk. And if you have been spoken to about that, then that's scary to take on board. So, like, that's just some of the issues. That
I would say that resonates throughout a lot of the complex developmental and epileptic encephalopathies. I think the cruelest thing with Dravet is it presents with a really long, very early seizure. And I can only imagine as a parent seeing my 4-month-old seizing for half an hour in front of me. It's having managed it in resus as a pediatric registrar during my training, as a pediatric neurology trainee, even, you know, with experience, it was really tough. But I can only imagine how difficult that was as a parent. And I think the phrase PTSD is something that really resonates within the experience of the parents. And then that course that you almost become, as a family, habituated to, we're used to the seizures.
Yeah.
And then you lose that level of support, and that really resonates. I've always been very open about my own journey through my brother having autism, severe learning difficulties, and epilepsy, and you know, and how that family support network and how the friendship and the networks melt away, and that really resonates. And I think in a way that pretty much a lot of the families listening to this will really understand. And I hope that the professionals listening as well will really get something from hearing that, because actually it's one of those things we don't think about in clinic. Is we might ask about parents, and that's great, but actually when it comes to siblings, having worn that t-shirt over the years, people forget there's that lack of support. And actually, I think that's one of the great things Dravet UK have done, is a lot of really lovely literature that really targets the siblings in a way that I don't think many other groups have ever addressed.
Yeah, and we do recognise that siblings are very, very important, and left unsupported, you know, I think it's very detrimental. And there's a lot of anxiety with siblings. I mean, I think there's a lot of anxiety with children in society now anyway, but I think particularly if you have witnessed those traumas and suddenly you're, you know, I often think about the older siblings in particular, who the excitement of this baby coming and you're all part of it, and then suddenly this baby comes and, you know, you might only be 2 yourself or 3 or, you know, whatever, young, and then suddenly the focus is completely off you and you are seeing your parents stressed. You are scared as well of what's happening. And I think quite often they're overlooked. And at Dravet Syndrome UK, we are really conscious of the siblings and looking at new ways to support them. I mean, we do have the weekend away every year annually that we take the families on to Centre Parks, and we have a whole day dedicated to the siblings. So the morning is we take them off and they either, the younger ones will do kind of paint a pot or something like a young scientist or something, and the older ones do laser tag. And you know, you can see the anxiety and the worry about them coming, and by the end of it, it's amazing. They've all bonded and they've all run around and they talk about their siblings, and there's no stigma. Everybody's in the same position, and we really make a fuss of them, and I think they're included. And then we have a party on the next day where everybody's involved, and they're Dravet siblings, and quite often they're adults through to kind of being quite young, and they're all on the dance floor and they're all dancing to Peppa Pig or something that they like that is not the social norm. And if someone has a seizure, it's not a big deal. We have an ambulance crew, but it just takes that stigma, and everyone's dancing. And the teenage siblings don't have to be embarrassed and looking over their shoulder that this is not normal. This is what it's like. And there's a big world of 400 people out there that are also going through the same issues, and this is normal for us. And it's really special.
Yeah, I will say that I have had families turning up after that weekend proudly in clinic with their Dravet Syndrome UK t-shirts on, absolutely raving about it and having had the most wonderful time. So I dare say the families who haven't been are probably fed up of hearing me talk about it, but and I'm sure all my colleagues on Facebook and all my friends on Facebook are usually fed up of me sharing every time Dravet UK shares a post. I am sharing that post because
Thank you.
I want as many people to know about it because it has been so rewarding for the families.
It is rewarding, but it's also quite hard. It's a big thing for a family to turn up to and meet and face your future. Some people aren't ready for it, and it can be really challenging, but it's always rewarding, and everyone always goes away. I mean, my son had a diagnosis, and I went 3 weeks later, and I can remember turning up, and he was only 3.5 at that point, and looking at him and thinking, well, you don't look like them, you look normal. And even though he was having these very long, prolonged seizures, and he really wasn't developing in the right way, but I looked at the older kids and thought, wow, they're quite profoundly disabled, aren't they? And my child doesn't look like that. So it can be very confronting. But also, it was life-changing for me in a very positive way. It really was a very positive way. And meeting people that are going through the same thing, there's nothing like it. I mean, my son had the first seizure that was self-resolving in the ball pit on the first night. And, normally we would call an ambulance, and everyone was like, oh, whose is this having a seizure? And the panic wasn't there, from the terror in their eyes because they'd seen it. And yeah, it was really, really affirming, I think.
You mentioned the word diagnosis, and that is something that I've heard you speak about a lot. And one of the things that really strikes me is we're getting better with genetic testing, but I think one of the things you've highlighted over the years is we're not getting better at getting the diagnoses. And I think as a clinician, there's always that worry, even with, Professor Brunklaus's modelers and all the sort of bits and pieces in our experience, people are worried about giving that diagnosis and saying, this is Dravet syndrome. What advice do you have as a parent who's been through the process to us as clinicians?
Is not to be too scared. I mean, to simplify, I know it's a complex diagnosis, but it is a clinical diagnosis at the end of the day. The gene, SCM1 gene, plays a big part, but it is a clinical diagnosis. And I think if you know that you've got a child, particularly with the SCM1A gene positive, and you are seeing a child or a baby who is presenting with prolonged seizures and is pretty obvious, give the diagnosis. Don't hold back. Don't give a diagnosis that says GES plus, because you don't know for sure. And don't give if you can, avoid giving an SCM1A type epilepsy, because it puts the families in no man's land. They don't know where they are. Like GES plus, okay, that's one thing. But I would much rather have a diagnosis of Dravet syndrome for my child and find out later that it is GES plus, and that's a better outcome, than being told I had GES plus for my child and planning the future, and then quite obviously it's Dravet, and then having that diagnosis, because for one, you can't get access to treatments, but if you don't have a Dravet diagnosis, but also it's about coming to terms with what you're living with and planning what your future may be like. You're not doing a favour to the families. It's a favour to you not to give the diagnosis. I really firmly believe that.
That is something and I remember hearing you say that. I think I must have been a registrar whenever I've heard that. And that's what I've always taken with me in my clinics. And I actually am very open with my families. Like, I'm giving you the diagnosis of Dravet. I hope I'm wrong and one day I get told, but I am really clear the phenotype is suggesting Dravet, and we're going to give the diagnosis today. Because actually, I've never removed that diagnosis when I've given it. I have removed plenty of Fs plus and made them Dravet. I have yet to remove a Dravet diagnosis. And that is because genuinely the phenotype declares itself and it tells me what it is. And that comes also to Ingrid Sheffer's papers, where we know that phenotype is much wider than everyone appreciated. And I think that is the most important thing. And I've always said, it comes down to what Galia said, give the diagnosis.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's good to know someone's listening, to be fair. I think it's very true. And, it's not an easy diagnosis, but to the point, it is a broad spectrum. It doesn't mean, some kids will talk, some kids don't talk. It's such a broad spectrum. It really is. And I think, every time I meet a new parent, they're like, where's my child going to be? Where's my child going to be? And I was that person. I wanted to know. And I really, and the thing I tend to say to people is, we don't know, because we don't know. You just don't know. However, what I would say is that your child is unlikely to live independently. And that's kind of all I can say. But I think that's I feel that that's as fair as you can go. I mean, some of them will live in supported living and they'll live really happily in supported living, but it's not independent. And then there are some that obviously will never be able to do any self-care for themselves. It's a true spectrum. And that's why I think the diagnosis can be hard.
I actually would say this comes down to the weekend as well, because actually that's what a lot of my younger patients have come away with, was actually when we give the diagnosis, when they read about it online, it seems doom and gloom.
Yeah.
But then they go to the weekend and actually they see the more able end. Yes, they're aware of the more profoundly disabled end, but actually they didn't appreciate how able the able end could be. I think they were really, and they've come away with, and I know you say it's quite confronting, but sometimes it's also, that weekend has proven to be a bit hopeful as well. So actually I'd say that has really been great.
Yeah, and I think it isn't all doom and gloom. I mean, there's a lot of doom and gloom, but there is also moments, and it's about the acceptance. There are different routes of acceptance. I think, it's a grieving process. A lot of this is like for the child that you were going to have and the planning that you were going to have and who they were going to be. And there are little milestones where it can hit you and you think, oh, I'm all right. And then, if you hit, quite often it's like school age or turning 18 but once you've become, if there's an acceptance, I think life will be better and you can enjoy the moments. I can remember my son going on a clinical trial and going on a new medication, and he is pretty non-verbal, to be fair. He does have his set phrases and I can communicate with him, but you can't have a conversation. You can't have any rational conversation. It's all very much driven with what he wants. But I can remember he went on a new drug and he used to call me mama, and then suddenly he started calling me mummy, which is a small change, but a big change for me. It made that's a wonderful thing to hear. And yeah, I'm still really pleased because he still calls me mummy and he hasn't gone back to mama, and he hasn't moved much past that, but I'm really happy with that. So there are positives. It's tough. There's no part of me thinks that it's not tough, but there are moments where it can be really, really life affirming, and you make friends in this world that you would never meet in a million years, and you get to kind of see all walks of life. And so that is the positive. There's a lot of negatives, but I think, yeah.
So we've talked sort of about how it impacts the family. We've talked about how it impacts the child. But one of the big things is, and we've talked about the impact on siblings and parents. And actually, one of the big things is transition, because actually that is a huge area. I know you're actively living through this process as an area. Whenever I've been at a conference in Munich, one of the things, it's done really suboptimally. We really want to improve it. And that's not just the UK. It's good to know.
No, it's everywhere.
It's the same problem. And my colleagues in the States as well. And it's one that we're really passionate about improving. What advice do you have, or what sort of insights have you gleaned? And I'd also like to say that we have just recently seen that Dravet UK have released their guide.
So the Dravet Syndrome UK transition guide, the new one, has just been published and is being distributed to families as we speak. Transition, it's, everyone says you fall off a cliff, and I think you kind of do. I think it's challenging at best. It's a nightmare at worst. I would say is planning early and knowing your rights is the thing that I have found remarkable. So my son is 18 in October, and they haven't been following due process. They've barely started. I mean, we're pushing our local authority, and they keep saying, no, we're following due process, and you're not. You've already broken the process. I mean, he's 17, and I'm very, very fortunate in a privileged position that I know a good adult neurologist, and I have a plan for where he's going, and he's going to go to someone who knows Dravet, and I know that his care will be very good for the neurology side of things. The thing that we are losing are the community nursing team. We are losing our community paediatrician, and that's going to go to the GP. I don't know. I can't tell you how it's going to be. I'm planning the best, for his accommodation. I mean, we're very, very, very privileged and lucky that we are planning to keep my son at home because he loves being at home with a team of carers. And we have notified the local authority that we no longer wish to be his carers. We want to be his parent. We will not be looking after him. We need to have carers in place. Whether that happens or not is going to be another matter. It should happen, but we will see. We're tired of being carers. We're tired, and we want to be in a position where our son is safely looked after at home with a team of carers, and that's what should happen. We don't want him to go to residential at this point. There's nothing wrong with residential, but for him, it's not the right place for him, I don't think, at the moment. I'm not saying never, but at the moment, it's not the right place. So it's going to be hard, but I think one of the biggest issues is finding a good neurologist who has an interest in epilepsy, who then is interested in Dravet, and they're like hen's teeth. And you think about neurology, they're looking after Alzheimer's, stroke, MS, and some of them have an interest in epilepsy. It's really hard. And as a charity, Dravet Syndrome UK are very keen to try and educate those adult neurologists. And we run our conference every other year, and we've got one coming up in November. And we invite those adult neurologists, and sometimes they'll come, sometimes they don't. But if you think about everything they're looking after, and I do think about it from their point of view, epilepsy is quite a small proportion of what they look after. Then you cut it down to genetic epilepsies or kind of DEEs, and then you look at Dravet. I mean, it's hard. But I
will say it's an area I love teaching the adult neurologists on, because they do genuinely look like they have absolute fear in their eyes, because you're talking about Dravet, and it's a small portion of the textbook, and they'll be told in a ward round you'll never see these kids. But actually, I think we're diagnosing more. They've probably looked after many more Dravet patients than they realise, with the lack of diagnoses, and that's on our historic passing diagnoses. And I dare say that actually we need to really get that buy-in from the next generation, the registrars. That's who we really need to be tackling and getting them that passion. We're very lucky in the UK. We've got people like Reese Thomas, who are very passionate about the DEAs and really keen to educate. And I love the conference. I think the debates that happen, the discussion between world experts. You cannot get that anywhere else. And I think that it was one of the best theoretical debates between Samir Zaberi and Ingrid Scheffer at one point. To me, as somebody who's had interest in Dravet syndrome, was one of the highlights of 2023. And I booked my rota this year based on the conference for November. It was leave request in Dravet UK. It was, I think, behind my family holiday. So again, if any professionals are listening to this, please do make sure, if you don't attend remotely, do actually go down. It is really one of the most rewarding professional conferences I've been to. The Dravet Syndrome UK conference professional day is on the 14th of November 2025, followed by the family day on the 15th of November in London.
Yeah, it is really good. And we're so lucky to have our medical board, who are amazing and really are world experts. And we couldn't be more lucky, really. But the family day equally is basically similar information, but we do breakout groups with our families, so they get to do workshops and with different experts, in particular around things like knowing your rights, kind of puberty, sexual health, which nobody talks about, and so there's lots of other aspects that we talk about. But yeah, it's really interesting for families as well. But yeah, it's we do need to educate the adults, because, like you say, there are many adults out there that don't have a diagnosis. Back to that diagnosis piece, it's horrific. But also our population is living longer, which is brilliant. And they need to be well cared for through to adulthood, because it is a lifelong condition, as we say. It's really interesting. I went to a presentation that was given by Professor Sisodia and Lisa Clayton, and they were showing the slides of all the research that's happened up to the children, and then you get to 18 and there's like nothing. It's just falling. Like what we understand is like the natural history of the child is early years, this is what happened, broken up, 18, then that's it. Well, it's not it. Like, what happens up post 18, what happens in adulthood? And that's something that Dravet Syndrome UK are really keen to kind of fund research to understand what's happening in adulthood and what the progression of the condition is. And back to the natural history study, which will help us, which is happening at the moment.
A great plug for the Horizon SCMNA study from episode 3 with Professor Brunklaus. I'm on the project management committee, and it's really, I think there's this thought process that the epilepsy burns out, but I don't know, does it? Or no. Or is it that just the research has really been pediatric based?
I think we don't know for sure, but from what I know from anecdotally and also from my own experience, that the seizures become more manageable potentially. Is that because we can manage them better? Is it because they're on better treatment? Or is it because of the natural history of the condition? However, there's still seizures. My son has seizures nearly every single night. He's still having seizures. They're just not an hour, 2 hour long. But we don't know. That could change any night. We just don't know.
Brings it to a big thing, 24/7 caring responsibility. I'm going to tell you, having been there, done that, and being, as much as my parents could shelter me from it, it was exhausting.
Yeah.
I didn't discover what a full night's sleep was until I was 18. I went to university and discovered that I could wake up refreshed.
Yeah, which normally shouldn't happen that way round, really, should it? It should be you go to university and you don't sleep. Yeah.
So how do you manage it?
Well, I mean, I'm very lucky. Again, I have a lot of care. So the early days of caring for my son, I had a newborn really for 3.5 years who didn't sleep. So it was that level of lack of sleep, exhausted. I think I just ran on adrenaline. And then I had another child. And so I had a newborn who didn't sleep. And then I had a 3.5-year-old that also didn't sleep. And our house was chaos. My husband took over caring duties for my son at night, and then would go to work and fall asleep at work in meetings, and just try and having to leave to go to hospital. It was awful, and really, like I said, that trauma and that PTSD, and I don't quite know how we got through it, but we did. You do get through these things on no sleep whatsoever, and no sleep and on high alert. The day I brought my daughter home from hospital, my son ended up in hospital as well. So my husband had to go with him, and that's the first time I hadn't been there. And so you have to relinquish some control as well and allow other people to help out. Other people help out my husband. So it's really, really hard. And then it continues because my son has no sense of danger at all. So if you leave him, he kind of knows you're leaving him, and he will climb something out, or he's left the house before. He will run in the road for a pigeon. He will pick up knives not that we have them lying around, but like he will find the thing that is not, you shouldn't do. It's remarkable. So from a safety point of view, he has to have somebody. But then also there's the seizures. You don't know when those seizures are going to happen. At the moment, they normally happen at night and when he's asleep. But 3 months ago, he had a seizure during the day out of the blue. So you cannot leave these people for a moment, and it's exhausting. And if I'm just going to put a wash on, you can't just pop and put a wash on, because someone has to have primary focus of him. And then obviously I've got my daughter. She's older now, but having to manage that and kind of split your time. So I'm fortunate that we've got care to help with him, because I think that makes him a much happier person, because we don't have to take him to the supermarket. He doesn't have to drag around with us. He lives in his world and does what he needs to do. And I do genuinely think he has behavioural issues. He really does. Challenging behaviours, but I think it's more about communication for him. And if someone's doesn't understand him, or they're not doing what he particularly wants to do at that time, then those behaviours really will appear and be challenging. And at night, we didn't sleep. We have night care now. So he, obviously, I've mentioned he still doesn't sleep particularly well, but it's really the seizures that happen and the chance of risk of SUDEP. For years we slept in a bed with him, for years. He's now as big as me, he's huge. And I don't sleep a wink when I am in a bed with him, because every movement I think is a seizure. You just can't sleep. And that's what a lot of our families suffer. Like, they don't sleep. Somebody sleeps with their child in case they die in the night. And that's not acceptable. I don't think that is not a way to live. They need to have the care, the respite, the proper medical support. I think I don't know whether you could stop SUDEP or not. I don't know. But if having somebody there, being there with your child to monitor whether they're going to die or not, I think is not an option. It should be supported by somebody who is awake at night and monitoring your child. The charity Dravet Syndrome UK provide nighttime monitoring systems to help kind of, there are a few options. A lot of them don't work for my son. They work for other people really well, but he won't keep a probe on at all. We use a video camera for him, but then I have somebody looking at it. We're either looking at it or I have somebody else looking at it. And I know that that's not the norm. Most people sleep with their child or are awake or have a monitor going off. And it's very, very, very tiring and exhausting. And I don't think you can think straight. You can't work. It's awful.
I actually don't know how you manage to do as much as you do with Dravet UK. I managed to have that 24/7 carrying parental responsibility. And I think it's great that you have been able to advocate and do those things. But I think more importantly, most parents don't know that they should be doing it, and that better can be done by them. And We
It can, and
consistently.
it can, and it's a fight. It's a fight. It's horrible because you have to be horrible. I mean, within reason, but you have to advocate for your child. And if you are so tired and you haven't slept for days, how can you do that? And at Dravet Syndrome UK, we've got a new family support person joining us to work along with the existing amazing team who do a great job already. But, we've got more families to look after, and we really want to empower those families by giving them literature that they can help back up just how hard it is, because it's not just the epilepsy and it's not just the behaviors. It's such a complex condition to manage, and it changes all the time. And I think that's what I see. My son goes to an incredible school, actually, and was very fortunate. It's near where we live. And some of those children behaviors are off the scale challenging, but he's such a complex kid to look after to them, because there's a health element that goes in with it. And his health really dictates how he is. So he can be quite chirpy one day, or he can be really tired, and that it doesn't always correlate with whether he slept or not. It can be, I think there's seizure activity probably going on there that's subclinical that we can't see. So he's very complex, and I think our children are exceptionally complex, and it's not a linear journey. It's not a linear journey.
I think it comes down to one thing. This is one of the most pharmacologically resistant seizure types, or seizure disorders. It is one that I think with a lot of the DEs, a lot of the literature points out that as you start your journey, the big focus is on seizures. As it evolves, I think parents and families become veterans. Managing seizures the way I think most pediatric neurologists would be jealous of the ability. And then it becomes actually the focus of what the real world is, which is actually the behaviors, the complex thing, the sleep, the sheer exhaustion, the dealing with your own anxiety, which understandably has developed. We know that 46% of siblings born of those with, I think it was actually Dravet, maybe DEs in general, actually have treatment for anxiety in adulthood. And then you have to think about, well, actually we're missing those real world things that every other family, and then we're losing all those supports. And then you get to 16, and then you start losing those medical supports, and you do lose the neurodevelopmental or community pediatrician. Your neurology care goes from a pediatric neurologist, who we're always accused by our adult colleagues of being a little bit too fluffy, a little bit too
nice, just nice.
Well, we're pediatricians first and foremost before we're pediatric neurologists. I do like to think we're a little bit fluffier, a little bit cuddlier. And then you suddenly are left, and then it becomes a weighing on parents. What happens to my child? Where do they go? Where are they best suited? Are they better in a residential accommodation with support? Are they better in home care? And then siblings at the same time are looking at their parents getting older and going, well, the decision making it's coming for me. I've never really had to be involved in those decisions. And suddenly I know that in 10, 15, 20 years time, I'm going to be the one asked the hard questions. And that's almost quite daunting as well. So I think it resonates throughout all of the DEs, but I think in Dravet, it's just something just so unique about it, as how cruel that journey is. But I think there, as you say, there's also quite a lot of hope in the journey as well. And it's about
it's about if you can plan as much as possible. Of course, there's a deputyship issue as well when they become 18, and that kind of decision making. And I think it is those decisions, the decisions you have to make for your child throughout their life. They're always hard. Like, whether do I change medication? If I do, what's that going to do? And it never stops. And I think, I do think, I've got parents with neurotypical kids, and I think all parents worry, but this is a new level of worry. And I think the same for the siblings. They have seen such worry, and they have that burden. And I think it's very, very tough, and it's tough as a parent to know what's normal teenage stuff, or what is is it Dravet that's causing this? And of course, it's always there. It's that underlying kind of responsibility, underlying, oh, I've got a cold. My daughter's got a cold at the moment. She's off school. She keeps away from her brother. It's that kind of, oh, I'll keep upstairs, and knowing, just having that responsibility of, it's just difficult. It's very hard. And I think COVID was very detrimental for our siblings. I think it was hard for everybody, but I think a lot of us, we didn't know, we shielded, we really did take it. And at some of the formative years of those children, the siblings, COVID was wonderful for my son. He loved it. Didn't have to go to school and didn't have to do anything. He really enjoyed himself. No one else did, but he did.
I think it was always one of those conditions that during COVID, I think we all worried quite extensively about. But it was great hearing how your story reflects that of pretty much every patient in my clinic.
Yeah.
And possibly every other patient in the UK. You could almost take your journey, and it would read very similarly to every person. I think that's why I think Dravet UK has been such a force for good, because it's informed by parents, it's guided by parents, it listens to parents. And just as a plug, I am doing Every Day in May for the City Ward Every Day in May, which is 5K every day in May. Please, if you do have anybody out there and they are doing it, please do sponsor them. It's 5K, 2 or 5K every day in May. I was out this morning doing my training, managed to get my 5K down to under 30 minutes, wearing my Dravet UK t-shirt. So
I love that. I've done it for this will be my 3rd year doing it, and it's brilliant. I absolutely love it. It's such a community, and everybody is so supportive. I just love doing it, and so more and more families have been doing it through the years. And I run around London because I live in London. I bumped into not many, that's an exaggeration, but a couple of Dravet parents whilst I've been running, and it's amazing. It's so good, and it's hard work is what it is, but it's really rewarding, and May is such a nice time to get out there and run. So and I do walk sometimes as well. You don't have to run every day. Running every day it does take its toll, but it's a brilliant community, and I'm really looking forward to it. So I'm welcome to the Everyday May crew. We will enjoy sharing stories every day. You can send your photo in every day. It's so it's good fun.
Well, as I said to everybody, it's a charity that's very close to my heart, very close to one that I thoroughly enjoy working with the patient group. And I think more importantly, it's Dravet UK has done so much good for my patients. I kind of have to do something back.
Well, thank you for your support, Micheal. It's really appreciated. It's really lovely to know that you're listening and you care, and you are looking after your patients so well. It is appreciated.
On the 23rd of June, we have International Dravet Awareness Day. And we have Let's Talk About Dravet, the live webinar, where we're going to have everybody back for a live webinar. And we're going to hopefully be able to answer some questions that are posed to us by the listeners. So Galia, thank you so much for coming and telling us your own journey, giving us, more importantly, your expert opinion as a parent who's lived through this, as somebody who's tirelessly advocated for children with Dravet throughout the entire UK.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, that's it for this episode. If you love this episode, please share it with your appropriate colleagues. The only way this podcast is going to get out there is by you lovely people sharing it. So I would appreciate it if you could. And if you want to stay with me and learn a little bit more about Dravet syndrome, then please join me on the next episode. For now, I'll say goodbye and see you next time.